The 2010s was an interesting decade. Just as the Call of Duty bubble was finally starting to burst and the industry realized they needed something new to bring to the table, Telltale Games moved everyone to tears with the first season of The Walking Dead. But afterwards, the two main writers quit, burned out by crunch and the toll of bad management, so they went on to form their own indie studio Camposanto and went on to create Firewatch. And Firewatch then went on to win several awards and land their creators a job at Valve, where they now have credited work on Dota and most notably on Half-Life Alyx. But what is Firewatch? Many accuse it of being just a walking simulator, coming out at a time where people were starting to get tired of those. But I don't really agree with this. Despite being a rather simplistic game, there is more to it than just the walking, so before I go into the details, let's cover the basics. Firewatch puts you in the hiking shorts of Henry, a man in his late 30s who, after dealing with some soul-crushing complications at home, he decides to take a job at the Forest Service to spend the summer getting away from everything, and also to collect his own thoughts. But things get complicated with spooky stuff happening around him, so he has to both do his job as a forest guard and solving a spooky mystery, with only the voice of Delilah, his boss and only radio contact, as his companion. And that's as much as I can say about the plot without spoiling it. Given that this is a story-driven first-person adventure game, the story is part of the gameplay. But like I said earlier, I won't call this a walking sim. I'd argue this leans more into being a park ranger / hiking simulator. Although you do spend a lot of your time walking and talking with Delilah, you also got your own duties to fulfill. Cleaning trash, pissing off angry campers who are too stupid to realize fireworks during a dry season is a bad idea, and clearing paths for future use, along with also taking care of whatever Delilah asks of you. So in order to fulfill your duties and also deal with whatever spooky stuff is lurking in the forest, you have to actually do some honest-to-goodness navigation. See, most games will usually set you in a corridor disguised as a big area and slap a hovering objective marker or a GPS line on a minimap for you to follow. While the forest in Firewatch is technically made of quote-unquote corridors, you do not get any real indicators of where you are supposed to go outside of your map and compass. This is one of those games that has been scratching an itch I had in recent years. Play the game relying more on what you yourself see, rather than the game pointing at what you are supposed to see. You have to learn landmarks and certain paths as you explore this forest, and if you feel lost, you can consult your map, and I mean that literally. Henry has to actually hold the map in his hand, in real time, and you have to look for the little GPS-like marker telling you where you are. Your objectives for the most part get circled in pencil, with the journey to reach those objectives being up to you. You actually want to plan your route while also doing some exploration along the way, with a little mini challenge being reaching your objective while looking at your map as little as possible. I love that. It's game design like this that makes it feel more like you are actively involved in the game world. Better yet, you can actually move fast if you want with a sprint button. So unlike actual walking sims, you are not stuck with slow walking having to wait for the next story beat to happen. Every once in a while you are going to come across rocky hills that you need to rappel down through, but you need rope in order to use them. There are gaps to jump, and there is also little rock walls to climb. There is a slight Metroidvania feel to the navigation in this game, as some places are going to be out of your reach early on, but as you make progress you are going to find the tools you need to open up those new paths, and true to that sweet old school exploration, your reward are shortcuts that will take you to earlier game areas a lot faster if you don't feel like walking too much or doing an entire climbing sequence. You also get a little assistance with the supply cache. Little boxes scattered around the forest carrying useful stuff for you, from climbing gear, to food, to map roads to update your own map and have an easier time navigating. But what else is there that I can mention without giving out major spoilers? Remember how I said there is walking and talking? Part of your job is to radio to Delilah to report your situation to her. This ranges from telling her about things you found, to comment on certain landmarks and events, to also getting to know each other. A detail I really like is that even though it doesn't affect the overall plot too much, conversations are not linear. You have options on what you'd like Henry to say, but you also have a limited time to pick what to say, meaning silence and even your own in-game actions are an option that she will react to. And choosing whether to tell her things or not is a game within itself. due to the spooky mystery going on in the forest and Delilah's reluctance to say too much when you ask her things, makes it look like there is more happening than meets the eye. But if that really is the case, it is entirely up to the player. You can have an entire playthrough where you truly bond with her and end the story as really good friends. Or you can have a different one where you don't talk much to her and the relation between the two of you may not be the most ideal. I think the best part in all of this is the fact that no matter what happens, the game is constantly asking for your input. Even if sometimes the conversation goes on for a bit longer, you can still move around to the next important place. And besides, both Henry and Delilah have some fun and interesting things to say almost all the time, making exploring the entire forest actually very fun and informative. But of course, even at launch, this game drew a fair share of criticism, and it wasn't really directed at this being an alleged walking sim. Most of it comes to the story and the pacing, and I can mostly attest to the latest. But I'm also gonna add my own 2 cents for flaws that I personally noticed. For a game that only needs me to look at something in order to highlight it and even open the option to report it on the radio, some of it seems to have a small, hitbox. Either you need to be at the right distance or your crosshair needs to be in a pixel perfect position for the highlight or the command to happen. It wasn't frequent, but I noticed it and it made it a little annoying to try to find the thing I actually was trying to look at. On the other hand, the game is 6 years old, and yet for some reason the objectives broke for the remainder of my first playthrough. At the start of the second day, I was given the objective to answer my radio, and that stayed on my screen forever. It didn't exactly break my experience, thankfully, but it did turn completing the rest of the game into a bit of a guessing game, which is not really too bad as I was already looking to explore everything by myself instead of relying on a hovering marker. But there were story bits that left me lost for a couple of minutes because I had to be in a very specific place that I just happened to stumble upon, and started the conversations that took me to the next chapter. Some achievements broke and did not unlock, and I had to do them again on a clean save file in order for it to work. Given that this is mostly a narrative-driven game with no real failure state, there really was no excuse for any of these things to happen. Now let's talk about the problem with the pacing. The game is actually short and sweet at 4 to 6 hours depending on whether you focus on completing the story. I ended up clocking 7 hours for my first run because I did go out of my way to explore everything I could, and I even spent a few extra minutes enjoying the view because, honestly, this game is on really good eye candy. But anyways, as I said earlier, the game is taking place in a little over 2 months and a half, or 79 days. It may sound like you are going to have a lot of adventures, but true to its grounded nature, you start going from day 1 to day 2 to suddenly skipping to something like day 20 and so on. The idea is that life in the mountains is so quiet and uneventful that not much happens, and you really don't want anything to happen. But by the time you're approaching the final act of the story, things start to feel very climactic before suddenly you're at the end game. The problem with this, and this is something I cannot really defend the game on, as much as I enjoy my time with it, is that it feels like there was at least an hour of story that got cut. Don't get me wrong, the mystery and the themes of the story are really good and very emotional, but, without giving out spoilers, it feels like the writers panicked as they ran out of time and they had the mystery solve itself in order to wrap things up ASAP. Again, you'll get what I mean if you play the game. But I guess if we take a deeper look at the themes of this game, it makes for a funny accident that the game ends as abruptly as it does. It fits with the story, so let's talk about that for a moment. As relaxing as the forest is, Firewatch is not a very happy game. Like I said before, Henry's backstory is a very sad one, and part of your choices in the prologue and then in the main story has you, the player, to decide how he comes to terms with the unfortunate events in his life and if he is willing to confront them once his journey in the forest is over. And this extends to the rest of the cast. Every major named character in this game has baggage. Everyone is in those mountains because they are running away from something, or they think some time apart from the world could help them. But as the spooky mystery shows, isolation while not having confronted your problems properly is not the healthiest mindset, and it can take its toll on an unprepared mind. That's where your choices matter. It's true that no matter what happens, the story is going to go a certain way, but that's part of the point. This is more about what will you do and what will you choose as you come closer to that ending. What kind of relationship you are having with Delilah as the two of you keep exchanging words without truly seeing each other face to face, and how you did your job as a forest guard. In other words, in spite of its flaws and some of its other shortcomings, I really enjoy my time with Firewatch, to the point I even went out of my way to get all the achievements. I guess the bigger tragedy for this game is knowing we are never going to see any other work from these developers, unless of course it's attached to a Valve's mainline game. Because there is a lot of potential here. This is a different kind of game. This is why I am willing to give Firewatch a very decent 8 out of 10. I know games that are as narrative driven as this one are not everyone's cup of tea, but for me, these smaller titles make for a very nice intermission in between bigger games. Having some variety in your gaming time is crucial to avoid burnout. Not every game has to be covered in the same genre or cover the same endless hours of gameplay. This would be a very boring industry if that was the case. Plus, atmospheric games have a very awesome and unique flavor to them. You don't always have to be a hero with superpowers fighting to save the world, or some overqualified bank robber causing millions in damages just to pull a crazy cartoony heist. Sometimes the best joys in life can be found in something as mundane, calm, and yet scary, like simply being a park ranger, dealing with your own problems and maybe getting to grow as a person, and also enjoying the calm of being isolated in a controlled environment.